Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Daryl, for introducing all that. And yeah, I did want to start with some gratitude. I'm really grateful for Daryl, the invitation to speak today, to share my story. Really grateful for Pat Cornelis. She's our school designer, somebody who's involved at Denver Christian, inviting the staff into this seeing and living God's story. So if I say the word Pat today, or the name Pat, that's who I mean. And she's not in this webinar today, but yeah, just very grateful. Ultimately, I'm grateful for the students. They went above and beyond my wildest expectations with this Flex project, and so I'll dive in. I want to talk about an image here. Sorry, that's the bell. I'm at school right now, finishing up the school day here in Denver. This is the cover of the magazine. That was part of this Flex project. We created this magazine together. It was done in a U.S. history classroom. This is 11th and 12th graders, so juniors and seniors. It was actually a dual credit history course. This actually served the place of a final project. And so I just want to start by talking about Deep Hope, walking you through that, and then getting to some examples here. So first, talking a little bit about the Deep Hope, and this is a long Deep Hope. Pat was very gracious to say, yeah, Cole, this is long, but there's really some meaningful things in here, she says. So I want to break it down a little bit. So I think that like compelling 60-year vision of teaching for transformation, the Deep Hope is that 60-year, that North Star, the thing that you're pointing to. And I think a good Deep Hope is something that does two things simultaneously well. It's discipline specific, so it's related to socials, math, English. In my case, the discipline is history, and it's dispositionally oriented. It's about trying to create virtue. It's trying to create people that go through this process that become different kinds of people. And so to walk through the actions, and Daryl, for you highlight those, you have remember there, if you can just the three there. So remember, retell, and reclaim are the major actions of this Deep Hope. So to read it fully, my Deep Hope is that we become storytellers who faithfully remember the stories of the past and truthfully retell the stories of all people in order to graciously reclaim the story of God in our lives and in his world. So the process of remembering, retelling, and reclaiming is the process of the discipline of history. It's about remembering, it's about the facts of history, names, dates, events. It's about retelling those in a creative way, in a truthful way. And it's about reclaiming the story, taking things that are old and making them new. And also Deep Hopes are about disposition. So if you could, the underlined words there, faithfully, truthfully, and graciously. It's about remembering isn't just remembering so you can be really good at Jeopardy. It's about being a person of faithfulness, as our God is, to be a person that's truthful, and to ultimately be people of grace, because we all need it. And so discipline and disposition ultimately leads us to a peculiar people. And that's the wording taken out of 1 Peter 2, that ultimately leads us to be a different kind of person that remember stories, that retell them, and ultimately in this process of reclaiming the story of God. And so a little bit about that storyline that comes out of this Deep Hope. This is the image for my storyline, is to reclaim the story. It has those action verbs highlighted: remember, retell, and then ultimately reclaim. Then the next picture I have here shows a little bit of my the storyline in action in the storyboard here. The aesthetic there is reclaimed wood. It's the first thing that you see when you walk in my room. You have some student work here, some reflections, some seminar discussion webs, some just like exit tickets, and a long-term learning target there. And so that's just a way that the storyline plays out on a day-to-day basis in my classroom. And how it played out in this Flex project, and I have this magazine here, and I want to just share how the storyline played out. If you can go to the next image, Daryl. So Reclaim was the name of the magazine. You can see that at the bottom here. That's the name of the magazine. And I thought it just like captured this idea well. This is just the tagline of our magazine on the inside cover. Reclaim is a magazine that aims to retell stories of our past in truthful and creative ways to inspire contemplation, conversation, and Christ-like response in the present. And so that language of storyline, that reclaim language, is fundamental to this project of creating this magazine together. So to talk a little bit about the through line evident in this project, it was justice seeking. The language of justice was littered all over this magazine. Students had to engage deeply with justice. And I would really want to show you just a student voice in relation to justice seeking. This is the back of the magazine here, was by a student named Taylor McNally, and she was very heavily involved in this process, really took on a lot of the aesthetic elements. This was her introduction to the photo essay element. She said, while the causes of racial tensions are multifaceted and complex, too often the role of problem fixer becomes division creator. In these types of scenarios, it is difficult and altogether necessary for people to be justice seekers who desire to bring wholeness where there's brokenness. And so you have the students participating in this language of through line. And this is involving some really touchy subjects and issues, right? The language of, racial injustice, civil rights movements, language that can really end up dividing people, but trying to be people of justice seeking was just the ultimate goal of these students here. And so to talk a little bit about the real work, the real needs, and the real people, to put a little bit more fine point on what the Flex project actually did. So the first document is showing here is the original document where we chose different roles to play in this Flex project. And so a model of excellence I actually had, and this is like free advertising. So if there's any like Comment or Cardis people on here, you're welcome. Comment magazine coming out of Cardis, the think tank coming out of Canada, I believe. And so Comment magazine was a model of excellence for us. Actually, I used Comment as some ways to introduce this project, and these were the roles that we all took on: an editorial, essays, graphic design, artwork, photo essay, and then just some closing reflections. So that's the real work that we were participating. The story I want to tell that fits the real needs and the real people was not one that I expected when I began this project. So Abigail's story, the person who chose to take on the essay, was a big intellectual ask and a big task. But she wanted to meet it on, and she wanted to create something meaningful, very, giving adherence to the justice that the Bible talks about, and not being so partisan and political. And she was trying to just toe that line well. And so in this project, I thought the real people would be like the people working for civil rights and the people in justice. But what I realized pretty soon, that the real people were the ones in my classroom, struggling and thinking about the definitions of justice and trying to do it in a way that was biblical and not so just politically divisive and all that stuff. And Abigail's story was a good highlight in that. She is the one second from the right in the image that you see here. And so some examples from the magazine to just walk you through those things. So I wrote an editorial. It was just kind of introducing students, or introducing the reader to some of the themes, some of the questions that the magazine is going to poke and prod. We let justice roll down. The name of the magazine was based on the passage from Amos, and so talked a little bit about the context there. And then the next example here was the photo essay. Several students took this on with themselves. There's a past element and a present element. The past element was led by Bill Tran. He had some historic photographs and then wrote up some stuff about Bloody Sunday and some other events from the past. There are also some contemporary elements that you can see here about George Floyd. What was really cool about this story is that Grace Adair was her name. These were her own photographs from Minneapolis. She visited the George Floyd Memorial, I think a month or two after those events happened, and was able to use her own photographs in this photo essay. The next example you see here was the longest, the intellectual, the large intellectual part of this magazine was an essay, and it was about this guy named James Meredith, and a civil rights activist, person still living today. The last two paragraphs might be the price. It's a free magazine, but it might be worth the price of this magazine altogether. She really brings it home. I almost was in tears when I read the last two paragraphs, and she did a fantastic job with that. And then what we were able, the last thing here was just some reflections, just really short reflections about justice seeking. I want to highlight James Yu was a student here. And he just basically had said that, hey, justice is about living as God intended. So final reflections, just connect it with the deep hope. This was a really Flex involved with practicing deep hope and reclaiming the story. We got to sign magazines and celebrate our learning in the AC and gift them to fellow students and teachers. And ultimately, this was a process of that, taking what is old, making it new. It is an absolute highlight of my teaching experience so far. I've not done something this meaningful with students, I would say, in my now 6 years of teaching. And so, thank you.
Thank you, Cole. Listen, before we mute you and you disappear again, can you speak a little bit? One of the things that TfT always encounters in every school and every teacher we work with is we feel some tension between, okay, I have all this stuff I need to cover, right? We're talking like junior, senior history. There's a lot of stuff I need to cover, and here we are really diving deep, right? So there's the tension of like really wide and narrow versus like I'm going to dive deep into something. Can you speak to your own experience of that? And how do you work through that?
Yeah. Teaching transformation is really I think it's like cut the fat more than anything. To use a metaphor, like I think you have to be okay as a history teacher. Yeah, you have things that you can get to, but ultimately it's really good to yeah, as you're saying, to be broad, but also to have times where you drill down deeper. I don't think that comes at a loss with content. I actually think that instead of just going on the surface and just terrible metaphor, but the drive-by method of history, right? Like, hey, that's World War II, that's, you know, civil rights movement. Instead of doing that, I think engaging students in the process of like a deeper form of historical reflection is going to be better ultimately than just doing such a, you know, just a bang up job about everything. And so if you're going to, you know, have some attrition somewhere, always usually favor quality over quantity. And so that's was the goal of this. Yeah, I had to get rid of a unit after the civil rights unit, but it was fine.
And what about this year? So this came out of last year. I imagine you're teaching the course again this year. That's also another very common question. Like, okay, so I set up these flex. Do I repeat them? Do I do something different? Not sure if you've done any thinking around that yet.
Yeah, so we have trimesters here at Denver Christian. And so I've kind of structured the course to culminate with a flex project. I have this is the idea in mind, is create another magazine, but it could take a different direction. That's the goal right now. And it does follow that process of remember, retell, reclaim. So term 1 is more focused on remembering. Term 2 is focused on retelling. I do a simulation called Reacting to the Past that helps students start to think as a historical character and retell stories from the past and people in that way. And then the last is reclaim. So the third term is really focused on this kind of stuff. What do you do now that you know this information, and how do you, you know, implement it into your life and become a different kind of person?